This is Optimal Finance Daily, episode 2149, 7 Money-Saving Techniques for Couples by Jen Hayes of jenhayes.me. And I'm your host and personal finance enthusiast, Diana Merriam. Let's get right to today's post and start optimizing your life. 7 Money-Saving Techniques for Couples by Jen Hayes of jenhayes.me. At least we save money is one thing you'll often hear from single people. And there's a bit of truth in that. You don't need to buy expensive Christmas, birthday, and Valentine's gifts if you're riding solo. However, it's also important to recognize just how much potential there is to save money when you're in a couple. In reality, the truth might be that those coupled up people have cheaper expenses and more options to save than those single folks. Number 1, handling the finances. If you've been in a relationship for a long time, then you're probably tied financially together in one way or another. Handled correctly, this can be a great way to get a hold of your finances and also plan for the future. One option is to have 3 bank accounts, one for him, one for her, and a joint account. The joint account will be for savings and maybe certain expenditures if you have a lot of shared bills. If you usually have difficulty saving money, then get in a relationship. You'll soon find out if you're not contributing your share to the pot. Number 2, the art of cheap traveling. And now to the fun stuff, traveling. When you're part of a couple, you have exponentially more options for cheap travel than people who are single. For starters, let's think about hotel rooms. Straight away, you're spending half the amount than you would if you had an accommodation just for one person. For various reasons, single occupancy rates really aren't all that attractive. And moving away from hotels, you can also just get up and go and have cheap traveling experiences by setting up camp and sleeping under the stars. Alone, you might not do this, but in a couple, what a romantic experience. Number 3, share one car. One of the best, most practical aspects of being in a relationship is that you don't have to splash all the cash on those expensive items just by yourself. A new television? Split that cost. All those cool kitchen gadgets? You're only paying half. Then, of course, there's the car. Some couples don't need 2 vehicles, and selling a vehicle that's surplus to requirements is a great way to raise some capital. Make sure others can drive your car when you insure your vehicle and then split its use. And bonus, you also won't end up driving everywhere by yourself. Half the time, your partner will drive for you. Number 4, moving in together. Of course, what I already mentioned only really applies if you're not already living together. If you're not, then it's worth thinking about, though only if you're ready. Moving in together is the biggest money-saving technique of all when it comes to a couple, especially if you live somewhere expensive. Just think about what you could do with all that disposable cash if your rent were instantly slashed in half. You could also save money on other housing-related expenses, like utilities and trash. If you're not living apart for any logical reason, it might be time to pop the question. Number 5, cut those expensive subscriptions in half. The New Yorker, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and so on. All those subscriptions can quickly add up, can't they? If you were alone, the best option would be to think only about the ones you really want to keep and then dump the rest. When you have a partner, you can both just assume responsibility for half the payments. You'll still be thoroughly entertained, and you'll also receive a monthly boost, a bank balance that hasn't been depleted due to all your subscriptions. Number 6, hold each other accountable. Who can be expected to always stay on top of their finances? It's not easy, and that's why so many people have financial troubles. If you have a partner, you'll be held accountable. There will be someone else there on hand to make sure you're making sound decisions with your money. It's good practice to have an open and honest conversation about money. Problems can begin when you start to hide those big purchases from your partner. And number 7, cheap date nights. Finally, let's not forget the ultimate money-saving technique, cheap date nights. While everyone else forces themselves to get dressed up and spend far too much money in the bars, you'll be able to have a cheap or even free night of entertainment. People watching in the park, board games, and a bottle of wine, stargazing. They're more fun than being in a club anyway, and you won't feel any effects on your bank balance. You just listened to the post titled 7 Money Saving Techniques for Couples by Jen Hayes of jenhayes.me. This is a relevant article for me because I'm fairly new at managing joint finances with my Midwestern gentleman. We're almost a year into living together, and it's been a big but also fun adjustment for me. I'm learning that with more variables to consider in my circumstances, the more likely I'm going to be wrong about my assumptions when it comes to budgeting. In the past, it was just me, my dog, my house, and one stable income. Now we have 3 pets. We found 2 kittens last December, plus my dog Buddy. A child we have half the time, a house, 1 stable income, and another income that varies greatly. With more variables at play, I'm finding that more unanticipated expenses come up, and there are simply more factors that need to be considered with planning. So there is more room for error when budgeting. We spent way over budget when we first started living together. My original budget simply wasn't realistic because I didn't have enough data to build from. Now I'm at a place of wondering if we even need a real budget the way I've done it in the past. While I agree with tracking spending, I'm not sure I need to get as granular with budgeting as I did when I was digging out of debt. We spend way below our means, so we're experimenting with just looking at our total spending from our first year living together and using that as a baseline of our yearly expenses. Once we get a better handle on our expenses, we'll be in a much better position to come up with savings and investing goals together because we'll be more knowledgeable about the gap between our income and our spending. So if you find yourself in a similar position, I'm going to encourage both of us to be patient with ourselves. As long as we continue to pay attention, we'll eventually be able to monitor our finances in a way that doesn't drive us crazy. That should do it for another edition of Optimal Finance Daily. I'll be back tomorrow as usual, so I'll see you there on the Wednesday show where your optimal life awaits.